Hello and great day to everyone. This is Yvette Owens from InteSoul Leadership, which is a segment of my business called DestinySpeak Inc. It's all about leadership. It's always been about leadership when it comes to me, because I know the importance and the great impact leaders can have when they come with a heart for what they're doing, for whom they're serving, and for whom they are leading. And so I am absolutely grateful to have a community of leaders who join me and my membership group called InteSoul Leadership, who are shaping and reformatting how we do leadership to make sure it really spans across the globe and across practices, that we think about who, not only who we're serving and who we're bringing our products to and our services to, but also the people who have joined, come along with us to be a part of the vision and to make the vision clear. If how we treat them and how we enable them to grow and accelerate is everything about what we do in InteSoul Leadership Community. So my guest today, woohoo, is Megan Deers. We met several years ago, like during COVID, right? Because we were able
Yeah.
to expand our communities across the globe when COVID hit, and we just connected and clicked and have been supportive of one another over those years. And I'm so grateful for who God puts in my life. And I know that she is one who is amazing that He has put in my life. She speaks very clearly to a lot of the things that I believe in. And so that's why I want to support her and what she's doing. So help me welcome Megan Deers of Paradox Rocks to the stage. Yay!
Thank you so much, Yvette. It's great to be here with you. And thank you so much for extending this invitation to me. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. So, Megan, let's start off with letting people know who you are, where you are, and what you do and why you do it. And then we'll get into more conversation about what it really means to be an intersoul leader.
Absolutely. So, hi, everyone. My name is Megan, and I'm based in Cape Town, South Africa. I am the founder of Paradox Rocks Communications. And at the moment, I describe myself as a multi-passionate content writer, creative coach, and entrepreneur. So multi-passionate says it all. I love having multiple projects running at one time. That's the way my brain works. And I love being involved with multiple projects as I move through my entrepreneurial space. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and an avid lover of the ocean and nature as well. So I think best to describe also the passion that I bring into this space is around our youth and literacy for our youth in particular.
Yeah, and that's how we met, right? Because we started talking about a school that we were developing at the time, my sisters and I, and obviously that sparked interest in you and just ignited that love for you that you have for the children. Talk about more about the literacy, combating that, and the work that you're doing in that field.
All right, thank you. Yes, Yvette, that's when we met, when your School of Creators was just about ready to launch, yours and your families. So for me, I've been building very steadily to this space that I'm in at the moment. And at this point in time, I am almost ready to launch my youth academy, which has its roots very firmly entrenched in literacy. And how I started this journey was just essentially starting my own business during COVID as a writer, copywriter, content creator. And I've been evolving over the last 4+ years in that space. And so today I'm in a space where I am a coach, content writer. I do creative works consultation with some clients. And I also do literacy tuition in my local community at the moment, as well as online. So everything that I've been building to this point has culminated in this space where my youth academy is about to launch one of the days. I'm very excited about that. And as you know, Yvette, I've been networking like crazy for the last few years in the entrepreneurial space
Mhm.
globally, so that I can build the right connections and meet the right people that can support me and whom I can support in our respective spaces. And so I stand here today being able to say that all of those connections, people, individuals, communities have absolutely helped me get to the space that I am today. So I'm extremely grateful for that.
And so, how do you get the folks into? And I know you're all about communication, right? And helping people really communicate. And the fact that you start from the very youngest with these literacy programs to executives and making sure that their content and their copyright and their communication is pristine, that's just that makes sense to me, right? And when you talk about the multi projects, it makes sense. So you go the full gamut. You're holistic, if I could say that. You're holistic when it comes to communication. And I love the fact that you start with, if I can start with the babies, then some of the
Yeah.
things that I have to conquer and help leaders with when they get to the older, perhaps I don't have to help them overcome some of those things because they're growing up and they're learning the correct way. So, where do you get some of the students from? Where do you get some of even your clientele? How do they find you?
Okay, so for me, it's been about obviously just within my community, advertising locally, spreading the word. But I've been absolutely blessed in my business that a lot of my work has come to me through referrals. So because of the networking that I do, and because of the fact that I think I've been in this space for about 4.5 years now, almost 4.5 years, it just means that every single day, every new person you meet, the word is spreading, right? And so somebody's referring you, somebody's asking the questions and passing that information on. And yes, I do the full gambit. I love the holistic approach because I don't believe that anything works in isolation.
Mm.
So for me, it is about being able to see what comes before and what comes after, and not just trying to solve one part of the puzzle, but being able to know where my service and my support fits into the bigger scheme of things as well, in respect of other people's support spaces. And I can be found on LinkedIn, I can be found on Facebook, I can be found on Instagram, I work on WhatsApp quite often, and just about every network space I can think of right now that I can climb into as a guest and a visitor. And very often I become a regular in many of the spaces. So although I am not someone that will be firmly planted on a stage with a spotlight on me, I do find my way into many spaces. And that's the way I prefer to operate in my space, is just to slowly but surely and very determinedly go about my thing.
So when I think about all the changes that are going on in our world, right, and what we've gone through, I often say what was before can't be what we have tomorrow, right? We're all in a very new space. We're all uncovering new things and new approaches, especially to leadership and things like that. Can you talk more about and I know you can, will you talk more about the importance of communication and how you see the shifting that you see in communication from what we used to do, how we used to do it, even some tones and things we used to have that now won't work, and what we do need to start to adopting going into as we're reformulating under this reformation that we're in.
Right. So, Yvette, I think for me, the key to all of this moving forward in the communication space is about individuality and authenticity. In the past, I feel that a lot of it was basically fed to us in a certain way, right? So, whether it was through the schooling system that you attended, your work processes, etc., you were told how to do things, when to do it, how often to do it, and all of those things. But I think COVID in that way has been really good in shaking things up and allowing people to just step outside of that mold for a change, and actually just to realize that there's more to this than what we had before. And so for me, it is really about helping people to recognize firstly who they are. So that's a big part of what I do in my coaching space. It's basically just helping people find their value, that they bring to the table as an individual, as a person, and being able to embrace that and then authentically live by that. And through that, I find that the communication becomes so much easier. It becomes simpler because it's no longer about being fed a mandate and having to carry that out, but rather just being yourself, being authentic, and just opening your mouth and allowing you to flow, right? So I think that is the key aspect of this moving forward, is the fact that I'm loving the fact that people are just stepping out as
Mhm.
themselves a lot more, and they are discovering, they're putting the effort into discovering who they are and what they bring to the table in their individual uniqueness. And that is the part that I'm loving the most, for sure.
Yeah, and I can see and hear the refreshing with that, because too often we've had leaders who just continue to put forth propaganda that they've been told to say, this is the message, and that kind of language was coming forth to, in especially in corporate. Here's the message. Let's all agree on the message. Let's all say the message, and people were literally saying it by rote as opposed to making it their own message so that it's more believable, right?
Correct.
And so I love that you're seeing that leaders are understanding and desiring to bring forth the individual, their individuality message, their uniqueness to the play. And that's not to be a rebel against any vision that an organization has. But what I think is important, as you're saying, is that when we believe in where we serve and what we do, and we can make that a part, that message a part of who we are, then it's
Yes.
all going to sound authentic. Then you have people coming and connecting at all those different connection points, which are every one of our leaders in the organization, right? Because they turn
Absolutely.
that communication around into what it means to them, and not
Correct.
just repeating a company line.
Correct. And I think through that one also, you invite people into the space fully, right? Instead of just passing on the message and expecting them to, by rote, pass it on again. You actually get them to absorb it, to give it a fresh perspective and an individualized perspective, which I think is important because we all connect with others on a totally different level and in a
Absolutely.
totally different way. And so by doing that, you can actually allow for that coming together to happen at various levels. So that's the fantastic part about it.
Yeah, and people connect with different people. Not everybody connects with me, not everybody connects with you, but if we
Right.
all who are on the same leadership team understand the message, embrace
Yes.
it as our own, now you have many multiple places where people can connect to the
Mhm.
vision, and then you get greater vision performance, which is what I talk about
Yes.
to leaders, about making sure we're getting vision performance, empowering people, and authenticity, and then you have the resilience that you need to go the distance, right?
For sure.
Can you talk about how you've been able to sustain? I mean, that's phenomenal. A lot of businesses start and don't finish. I know it's not always an easy journey, but can you talk about your resilience journey?
Yes, for sure. I think for me, the secret has been finding the key to versatility that I need in my space. And so I know this is how my brain works, right? I do a lot of introspection, I do a lot of self empowerment and self discovery. And so it's been a definite journey up to this point. But by allowing myself to do the introspection and just to figure out what it is that Megan is and what Megan needs has been the biggest turning point for me. Because if I had continued the journey that I started 4 years ago on the route I was planning at the time, I don't think I'd be here today,
Mm,
because so many changes have taken place within myself as a person, but also my entrepreneurial journey. And it's because you don't know what you don't know, and as
right.
you pick up things and pick up experience, and as you meet people with different perspectives, you suddenly realize that there's room for improvement, there's room for growth, there's room for something more or something more exciting, something bigger than what you expected initially. And so I think it's just about also being open to those opportunities and the fact that this exists every day. And as an entrepreneur, you would know exactly that. You know, when you least expect it, something jumps out at you, and it's up to you to grasp opportunity and actually just run with it, right? So I think for me, the fulcrum has been working with that versatility and knowing that I'm a multi-passionate, because I think at least my first 3 or 4 coaches in the first few years actually said to me, Megan, let's just focus on one thing. And that's not the way Megan's brain works. And Megan was trying to suppress everything else that was running around in her head. And, you know, everything was conflicting. And eventually I couldn't do that anymore. And I stepped back and I just went, right, how do I see this playing out? And I took the better part of the last 3 years to actually piece it all together in my head, so that I could make sense of it and then interpret that across to other people so they could see the vision, understand the vision right along with me. So thankfully, I did all of that work to get me to this point, but it's an ongoing evolution.
I know you're my sister because I just did a piece last week about the multifaceted masterpiece, and it's like people say focus on one thing, as if people can't make the distinction between, oh,
Yeah,
this is when you're doing this and this is when you're doing
right.
that. And I believe there's more of us than have been allowed to come forth, and the fact that we're
Yeah,
speaking out and saying, yeah, I'm multifaceted, I'm multi-passionate, and I've been given the gift to do them all really well, and I
yes,
know when to be in one space versus the other, and I know how to
yes.
blend them all, right? So thank you. Thank you for saying that.
It's my
So,
pleasure. And can I just tell you, funny story. I started my business off during 2020 as Megan Creative Copy and Content. And as I was going through this whole journey of discovering how to piece all my puzzle pieces together, I eventually ended up doing a rebrand about a year and a half ago. And that's where Paradox Rocks comes from, my business name. I finally got tired of trying to hide the fact that I love certain parts of tech as much as I like creativity, and that I write for tech as well as the creative industry, and just the fact that I'm typically a walking paradox, right? So I just got tired to some degree of having to almost mask that in certain instances when people couldn't quite see how people could be a multi-passionate and be a successful one. And so it took me a long time to get to the point where I went, right, throw down tools, let's just figure this out, how to step into that space as positively and authentically and as successfully as possible. And that's when my rebrand happened. And so that's what Paradox Rocks is all about. It's about celebrating the fact that I'm totally, totally different and a complete nutcase half the time. But that is when I think gave myself permission to actually just fully step into it. So that's a fun story about where Paradox Rocks comes from.
that is amazing. And I'm so glad you stepped into that space, because more of us are trying to get there and are there, and like, getting to the, you really do get to the point of like, forget it.
Right.
Which your formula of how you're doing is not working for me, because that's not who I am. This is who
Exactly.
I am. So
Yeah.
thank you, thank you, thank you for doing that and for sharing that here, because I'm sure there's going to be some listeners, if not now, but even later on the replay, who are going to be grateful that you shared that in the way that you did, so that they understand. Yes, yes, that's what I've been trying to say.
And isn't it a relief, Yvette, when you actually just step into that space and
So
what have I been waiting for all of this time? That's the
right.
first question I asked myself after the first while of doing that. And yeah, it's just a full, I think, full body release when you actually do get to the point where you just step out as yourself and just go, I'm embracing this and let's see where that takes me.
It is what it is. I am who I am.
Yes.
So let's talk about the fact that you have been a founding member of the InteSoul leadership community. Um, we've been growing and getting momentum in that space. If you can tell me what inspired you to say yes when I asked you, um, and how does it support your influence and your approach as a leader in your spaces?
Okay. So, Yvette, I think what inspired me at the time was, quite honestly, your timing. When you approached me about the opportunity to become one of your founding members in this space, you probably do remember the story, but I laughed for 5 minutes flat, right? I remember you saying to me that you wanted me to become one of your leadership influences in the space. And I couldn't picture myself in that role. So I laughed at you for about 5 minutes on that call first, right? And I
And
think
you
you'll
said
remember
your
that.
daughter's not going to believe that you're going to tell your daughter that you're an influencer now. I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. I'd forgotten about that. So I think your timing was perfect because that came to me at the point where I was really getting to that point of being fed up of just trying everything else, and then being ready to step into that space of, this is me and this is how I want to do things. And so when I had taken a few minutes out to think about what you had put on the table there, I realized that one of the things that I need to come to terms with in my space is that not all leaders are loud and on a stage every day and boisterous and, just constantly in the public eye. But some leaders come from a place of quiet determination and quietly chipping away at the focal area that they've placed emphasis on, or that they are placing emphasis on. And so for me, the culmination of those two areas, it was just perfect timing for me. And so I was in that space right then where I was prepared to step out to some degree from my comfort zone and just go, right, let's see where this new approach can take me, as Paradox rocks. And so you got me in that moment. So that was a large part of the decision making, but also because I knew that my vision at that point was just, it was exploding. So initially I just wanted to help people become literate, help them read, right?
Mm.
And now I'm into creating whole and wholesome, happy people. And it's a whole big picture that has been added to that. So I was just stepping into that space and realizing how big this vision is becoming, and knowing that this is the kind of support space that would really help me fulfill those roles and step into those roles, but also where I could pump my value into a space and know that it is relevant and helpful to people within that space. So I think that's what inspired me ultimately to step into that space with you guys.
Oh, nice. Can you just speak a little bit to how big is this literacy issue in our world? I mean, I don't think I think we are reading so much, we're on social media so much, we don't really think that, I don't know if we even think that it's still a problem, but um, can you just speak to the dynamic of it and the
Yes.
size of it and things like that?
Yes, thank you, Vet. So over the last couple of years that I've been collaborating and speaking to people within the education and the literacy space, the one thing that has become very clear is, number one, that it's a global problem, right? Our youth, our kids are not reading anymore. We are not actually stepping up as parents to say, this is a key skill. This is something you will need every single day of your life. And you will need literacy in your home language at the very least in order to really shine and be successful in other areas of your life. Because the one thing that I always say when I speak to the parents of my new students in the tuition space or the youth that I'm addressing, I say to them that you can be the best sound engineer, you can be the best architect, you can be the best mathematician in the world. But if you cannot read and understand the next contract that has been offered to you,
Mm.
where does that leave you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it is not so much firstly about reading, but it's putting the emphasis on reading with comprehension, being able to interpret and apply
Yeah.
what you're reading. So the reading, challenge number one, because not enough of our kids are doing it, and that's globally. Number two, it's about pushing that the reading becomes a reading with comprehension so that our kids are getting the support to understand what they are reading. And
Right.
thirdly, further support to be able to apply that in their lives and therefore make the information useful. So it is a global problem. Locally in South Africa, our education system is nowhere close to what it needs to be, especially not if you consider the fact that we have 11 official languages in South Africa.
Mm.
English is a mainstream medium of language locally as well as internationally, but a large percentage of our kids cannot speak English on a level where you can actually say that they are fully literate in English. So that is a huge problem because the majority of our schools are operating in either English or Afrikaans, first and second language, and the large majority of our kids are coming into school without having experienced English or
Yeah.
Afrikaans at all.
Yeah.
So it's a
I'm
huge
wondering also, I mentioned social media, but people use abbreviations on their texting and all that kind of. I'm wondering if we're seeing from an adult side even a falling away from being literate because everybody's taking all the shortcuts, right?
that,
And
right?
so this is why your work is so important on all scale, that holistic perspective that you're taking,
Yeah,
because I we may be deteriorating on one end, not
yes,
supporting even getting them off on the right footing on the other end. And here you're helping to close those gaps on both ends and throughout the whole spectrum. So
correct.
yeah, that's amazing. So when we think about the InteSoul leadership community, and I founded it because I knew that there are leaders out there that want to be authentic, that appreciate and understand the importance of integrity, and that we need to show up looking different. And when I mean that, I mean our demeanor, our composition looking different, not necessarily our physical traits looking different, although we could have more diversity in some
Yes,
spaces from leadership. And that we sound different, but most importantly, we leave people feeling different. And so
right.
those are that core values. So how do you see that playing out in your day-to-day work, and aligning our core values and InteSoul leadership community? How do you see that aligning with how you operate as a leader?
So for me, I think the big part of that, where that shows up in my space, is because I do individualize my connection with people. So new people I meet, new students I come across, I tend to go quite one-on-one with people, and even in the networking space, that's just the way I operate from a relationship perspective. And from that start, by building the relationship from a very individualized and very focused space, I find that my relationships get off the ground faster. They really, it fosters stronger relationships, but also the fact that by doing that, I'm encouraging each person to just be themselves. And that's ultimately what I want, because if I can connect with my students authentically, I've got a greater chance of helping them and supporting them through their process to success. If they are hiding and covering up what they don't know and not connecting with me as a tutor, for example, or a mentor, it's going to be a more difficult road to ultimately getting them to successfully read, write, and understand. So for me, I think it plays out in the way that I connect with people. And again, back to the authenticity of just being yourself, finding a common space where you and that other person connect very well. And just as an example, one of my most recent literacy students, he struggles with reading. He struggles with English not being his first or second language, but that's his mainstream schooling language. But both of us love music. So what do? We connect over music. And I encourage his mom to allow him to listen to the lyrics because I use the
Mm,
lyrics to teach him English, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it will keep his interest piqued. It will keep the relationship growing that we are building. But also it leaves him in a bit of a comfort space when it comes to interacting with me.
Mhm.
Rather than me saying to his mom, nope, we need to cut out the music because it's not helping him. I say to my parents, even if your child is reading a comic book, if they are reading for 30 minutes a day, it works for me.
Mhm.
So meeting people where they are, I think is
Yeah,
important.
yeah. So as we start to wrap up, what advice would you give any leader who is might be looking for some additional support or wondering more about InteSoul leadership community? What advice would you give them about even considering joining our community and being part of this? I like to say it's a movement. It's a
Right.
movement because we are setting the standard of how leaders should show up in the spaces that they're in and supporting them, those who might have been feeling like I'm a lone soldier out here because I believe this, and now they can come into this community and say I'm not by myself. There are other people who think. So, what advice would you give leaders?
I would absolutely invite them into the space. Give us a try, jump in, join us. Because the one thing that I found in the InteSoul community is your individuality matters and it contributes more than you know because there are so many different leadership styles. There are so many different perspectives to leadership and what leadership is. And the more people we have in that space, bouncing ideas off one another, testing those barriers and figuring out what it is that we can bring into the space that makes us innovative and just staying relevant. I think the more people we can welcome into the space that can help us do that, the better. And it's an all-inclusive space. It's a really genuine and dynamic space, forward-thinking space, and I would definitely invite them into the space for sure.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And if you're listening and you've been watching and you've been gleaning and inspired by Megan, and you really want to learn more about the InterSoul leadership community, please reach out to me, DM me. I'll also have Megan's contact information in the post after the broadcast, so you can reach out to her. About all the things that she's doing and where you can find her, and if you need some help around the communication, coaching, and or you want to learn more about the literacy work that she's doing, uh, I would tap into her. I would indeed. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Megan, for being a part of the InterSoul leadership community. I really appreciate it. I value what you bring to the table, and I thank you for especially saying everybody's not on the stage doing all this big things, but leaders show up every day, and it's how we show up, whether it's at a big thing or a one-on-one thing. We're leading, and we need to be very conscious of the impact that we're making on the individual lives around us. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and I'll share your contact information so people can reach you. Thank you all for joining us. We will share more with our other InterSoul leaders, members of that community who are willing to share their story over the next few weeks. Join us, and then you can become a member too. And I'll tell you how. Thanks again. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Yvette.
Good morning. Hello. How are you? In this world today, I am inviting all leaders to join me on the InterSoul Leadership Podcast. Have you been wondering where is the support that you need as a leader? You're there for everyone else. You're trying to help your teams navigate through the changes and pivot where it's necessary. Are you struggling with how to keep them motivated? Do you find that you're called to meetings, or you are even yourself finding that you're calling people to meetings and really don't have any real agenda? And so people are feeling it more of a waste of time, all in the name of keeping everyone engaged. Look, you don't have to fly solo. I say it all the time. Leaders need support as well. I understand, after being a veteran leader in many facets, that it can be weighty. It can be weighty. But here's the answer. InteSoul Leadership is providing content with special guests based on my insights and wisdoms and experience, based on the various leaders that I bring into the podcast. Also, you can get the support that you need. You get this thought provoking ideas, insight that will help you change how you're approaching the situation that you are facing right now. That you're facing right now. So I encourage you, join and log in, subscribe to the InteSoul Leadership Podcast. It's on my YouTube channel. You'll find the link in this post. You will find insightful information there, and wonderful guests who are going to share their wisdom. Wisdom is the root of all things. It's the greater of all things. And it's my heart to serve at least 1 million leaders so that we elevate to a place that we're creating healthy cultures everywhere. So I invite you to join me on the InteSoul Leadership Podcast every Thursday. Join us there on YouTube. Please subscribe, share, and like.